Hi, I'm Vivian Dempsey, and I've been teaching the Writing Edge Bar Review course for nearly 30 years. What I do in my course that's different from many of the other courses is, number one, I focus just on the issues that are likely to come up on the essays. So it's a smaller body of law. And then we practice and practice and practice, so you get really good at recognizing fact patterns that raise these issues and at responding to the facts and reasoning about with those facts. Okay. What people try to do, because they're dealing with this massive universe of law that they're using for the MBEs, which is not an appropriate it's not an appropriate amount of law. It's not the right law to be studying for the essays. Is they try to make their life easier by having something prepped in advance that they can just plop into the bar exam, a template or a format or a checklist of issues. That's their attempt to relieve the massive amounts of law that they learned. Unfortunately, it's the wrong fix for the problem. The real fix is concentrating just on the issues you need to work on and really zeroing in on those, and then learning a technique that allows you to respond to the problem that the question gives you. I do that, I train you to do that by teaching you a method of analyzing the essay questions based on the facts you're given. Okay? Imagine somebody who's just been trained in CPR. He's just finished his course. He's walking down the street. He knows CPR, he knows how to save somebody's life, knows how to give the kiss of life. He sees somebody obviously in distress on the sidewalk. Having just gotten CPR training, he runs up, picks the guy's head up, gives him the kiss of life, okay, starts pounding on his chest. Well, this fellow has a spinal injury. He slipped and fell and has a spinal injury. And so what the rescuer is doing is precisely the wrong thing to be doing for this particular person. That is the analogy to people coming in pre-prepared on what they're going to write on a given kind of essay question. Instead, of course, the solution to our slip and fall would have been for the rescuer to say, what seems to be the trouble? Where do you hurt? How can I help you? And that's what you have to ask the essay question. One of the things I say is, let the facts of the question tell you what the issues are. And that's the methodology that I teach you. It's actually a whole chapter and a DVD that comes with my course called How to Fact Issue Spot an Essay Question. This is just a little quick sample. So the first time you read the question, you get the big picture. You get the overview of all the major issues that you see in the question. You create a sheet of paper and you list those big pictures, issues, up in the right-hand corner of that sheet of paper. Then you go back with a fine-tooth comb or with a magnifying glass and you go through the facts in the question, phrase by phrase, in the order it's given, and react to that fact and see what issue it raises. So in this question, the facts in the question that speak to me about what I need to reason about are the fact that Mark, the broker, only looked for a week for Angela and then said, I found the perfect house for you. Well, how many of you have had the perfect house turn up in a week? It's usually a more difficult process than that. You already know, because you've read the entire question, that the reason Mark found the perfect house so quickly is the house was owned by his cousin and he was going to split the cost of the purchase price of the house with her. So it was a natural for him. It was the deal he was going to make the most money on. So him representing the house as perfect for her, and then that the house was in pristine condition. Okay, now generally these could have been seen as puffing in a normal misrepresentation situation, but because he was the broker, he was a fiduciary of Angela, and even those sorts of statements were actionable as misrepresentation because of their relationship. Okay, then we move on to Carol talking to Angela, and Angela noticed that there were what appeared to be animal droppings on the deck outside the house, and Carol said, "Oh, well, we've never before had a problem like that." Well, if you have bats in your house, you're going to have animal droppings on a regular basis. So that was actually a lie right there. Then Angela said that we've never had any pests. And the word pests is in quotation marks. This is really the bar examiners trying to call your attention to the word pests, and that Carol was intentionally stressing that, oh, well, we don't have pests. We have bats, but they're not pests. Okay, so that was the reason for the quotation marks. So even though Carol and Angela are, you know, not adversaries, but they're on opposite sides of the deal, and therefore there's no fiduciary relationship, a half-truth that is intended for the client to rely on, okay, of a factual nature, is actionable as a misrepresentation, because once a half-truth is told, the person is it's incumbent upon the person to actually disclose the full truth, because she knows that the client is going to be relying on the half-truth. So Carol saying we don't have any pests required her to say, well, we do have bats actually, and we know that Carol knew that there were bats because she was desperate to sell. Okay, so what we get down here at the bottom of the question, I wrote A instead of M, is that Carol and Mark are cousins. Mark knows very clearly that there are bats in the house, and that that's the reason that Carol is willing to split the price of the house with him to a seller. So whoever, you know, whatever sucker he could come up with to buy the house. Okay, she's willing to give him half the price, the sale price of the house. Okay, so this is what's new and different about this remedies question. Normally remedies questions get fully into equity, and you've got constructive trust and equitable lien and unclean hands and latches and a whole bunch of really equitable remedies that don't come up in a usual question. That's not the case here. One of them does, but other than that, that's not really the game that's being played here. What this question is giving you is that Carol and Mark are in league with each other. They're acting in concert to steer Angela to the house, and then they're almost playing a tag team game of coming up with the misrepresentations, the fraud. Mark says half of them, and Carol says the other half of them. All right, and then they're splitting the price of the house. So what remedies really speak to that? That's what this question is getting at in the factual pattern. So we're already told that the tort and the contract were proven. So we're only looking then for the remedies both in tort and in contract. In tort, the normal remedy is compensatory damages, which is any damages that are foreseeably caused by the wrong. But in the situation of fraud, the remedy is actually almost a contract remedy, which, if you think about it, fraud is both a contract and a tort issue. So the plaintiff can get expectation damages, benefit of the bargain, just as she could and just as she will in contracts. Okay, there's two measures of the expectation damages. The first one is out of pocket, which takes the sale price of the house, the price that P paid, and subtracts from that its true value as damaged, as defective. Here, let's just assume that a house that contains bats on a seasonal basis is worth $300,000. She paid $500,000, so 500 minus 300, her damages are $200,000, the difference between the two. But there's a more beneficial formula for Angela, which is expectation damages, the benefit of the bargain, the value of the house as it was represented. So how much would this house have sold in a market, okay, given its condition, given its pristine condition, pest-free as it had been represented. Given that this sale concluded so quickly, she was only looking for a week, and Carol was, of course, desperate to sell, the $500,000 price might actually be lower than the market value of the house. So for this measure of damages, we don't have any numbers here, but let's assume that $500,000 is not its market value. it would actually have sold for $600,000 if it had been as represented. Okay. We take that $600,000 figure and then subtract from it the value of the house as in its defective condition, the $300,000. So here, $600,000 minus $300,000, the damages are $300,000. So that's a better measure of damages. And there are facts, basically the desperation of Carol to sell and the quick conclusion of the deal, which indicate that the sale price might actually, that it's reasonable to assume that the sale price might actually not be a true representation of the value of the property. We're in torts now. Now the next issue would be punitive damages, maybe more likely against Mark than against Carol because of Mark's fiduciary relationship with Angela. But when the wrongdoing is egregious, okay, also defined as willful, wanton, and malicious, then punitive damages, exemplary damages on top of the actual losses can be recovered. And here, because of the Mark and Carol operating in league to fool Angela, I think punitive damages would be recoverable regardless of which of them you're talking about, whether the defendant is Carol or whether it's Mark. But here we start getting into what I think was hinted at by the facts of this question, and that is that Mark and Carol have joint and several liability. Both of them, or let me say either of them, are liable 100% for Angela's harm. Now, where does this come up? It comes up because the $500,000 was split. Carol got $250,000 and Mark got $250,000. So the first thing you might think is, well, Angela can sue Carol for $250,000, Angela can sue Mark for $250,000. Okay, but under joint and several liability, she can choose which one of them she wants to sue, and that person is liable for the entire amount of her harm, of her damages. The reason we want to go there is it tells you that Mark took his $250 booty from this sale and he put it into a stock account, stock portfolio. It tells you that the stock portfolio is now worth $750,000. So if Angela chooses to sue Mark, establishes the joint and several liability, she can get her damages against Mark, and through the equitable remedy of constructive trust, she can get the entire value of the stock portfolio, the $750,000 value that it now has, through tracing, because that whole amount of profit came from the money that he defrauded from Angela. Okay, so we want to use Mark because we can use constructive trust against Mark. It doesn't say what Angela did with the money, so we don't have an equitable theory that we can hook that on. Okay, so that's the tort remedy. Okay. By the way, the elements of constructive trust are wrongful appropriation, tracing, unjust enrichment, and an increase in value. And the wrongful appropriation was the fraud, of course. Okay, the contract remedy gives a choice for the plaintiff of affirming the contract or denying the contract. Okay, so it's plaintiff's choice. She can choose to say the contract was never valid because of the fraud. Okay, there was never a true meeting of the minds, and so I want rescission and restitution. I want all the money back all the consideration that we gave each other, and all the other damages that flow approximately from that. Okay, or she can say, I want to affirm this contract, and I want to force the defendant to provide for me what she said she was providing, which is a pest-free house. Okay, so that's the expectation damages. Now remember, we had expectation damages in torts, so we've actually already discussed the tort remedy. In contract, aside from the traditional expectation damages, you can also have the make good cost. And I kind of like this one. The make good cost would put the burden on the defendant to pay whatever it cost to rid the house of bats, okay? To make the house as she had represented the house was going to be, okay? So that would be the make good cost. However, and this goes into a little bit more reasoning here, it's hard to get rid of bats. It's really hard. First of all, they're seasonal, so you don't know whether you got rid of them or not. The effectiveness of the ability to get rid of the bats is kind of an unknown. So it may be that the damages, foreseeable, unavoidable, causal, and certain, the damages under this remedy are not certain. We can't put an accurate dollar figure on how much it would cost to rid the house of bats. That's convenient because that then takes us into equity, and because the legal damages are inadequate, and that takes us into injunctive relief. And in this one, we would be asking the court to order Carol to rid the house of bats, for her to do the work, not to provide money to Angela to do it, but for her to be on the hook until the house is bat-free. Now, there's a little bit of a problem in equity here because courts don't like injunctions that require that they monitor enforcement. They monitor that the defendant is obeying the order. Okay, so you just reason about that. But given the fact that the make good remedy is really not possible here, because how do you know if you've gotten rid of the bats? A court may actually entertain the idea of keeping Carol on the hook to do the work that it takes to do that. So that's really where the question came down. It was, and for Mark, the remedy, for Mark, we already did the Mark remedy for the torts, which is that he's got the constructive trust, so we want to go for him there. But under the contract theories, there's a contract between Mark and Angela, and there's a different contract between Carol and Angela. Carol and Angela, it's sale of the house. That's a contract. And Mark and Angela, it's the brokerage contract. So there's contracts in both situations, and both of them committed fraud. And the courts will permit Angela to get her damages for fraud from either of the people that she's in contract with. So even under just the brokerage contract, she can get full remedies from Mark. Okay, everything that she's lost, she can get from Mark. So the issues here were really about Mark and Carol acting in concert with one another. That was what was sort of new and different about this question, and you needed to find remedies that were responsive to that. I truly did think this was the hardest question on the bar, and of course it was number 6 on Thursday, so tough position also. That's all I have to say about this one. I look forward to hearing from you, and you can see my other answers on YouTube or on thewritingedge.com.